Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell stood at attention in the morning sun at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Her uniform was pressed sharp, her boots polished to a mirror shine. At 32 years old, she had served her country for 11 years. But right now, listening to the laughter coming from the shooting range ahead, she felt like a recruit all over again. "Look who finally showed up," called out Master Sergeant Derek Hayes. He was the team leader of Phantom Squad, the base's elite sniper unit. 6 men stood around him, all wearing the same smug expression. "Thought maybe you changed your mind, Mitchell." Sarah kept her face neutral. She had learned long ago not to show emotion when men like Hayes were testing her. "Reporting as ordered, Master Sergeant." Hayes walked closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a linebacker. He had 20 years in the service and never let anyone forget it. "You know why you're here?" "Yes, Master Sergeant, to demonstrate my qualifications for the advanced sniper program." One of the other men snorted. Corporal Jimmy Russo, a loudmouth from Boston who thought he was God's gift to the military. "This should be good," he muttered to the others. Hayes held up a hand, silencing them, but Sarah could see the amusement in his eyes, too. "Mitchell, you've got a decent record, I'll give you that. You passed the basic sniper course 3 years ago. You've done some field work overseas, but what you're asking for is different." "I understand, Master Sergeant." "Do you?" Hayes crossed his arms. "Phantom Squad isn't just any unit. We take the impossible shots. We go where others can't. We've been working together for 5 years. We're like brothers out there, and you want to break up that dynamic." Sarah felt heat rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, Master Sergeant, I'm not asking to break up anything. I'm asking for the chance to add value to the team. My scores speak for themselves." Russo laughed out loud at that. "Scores on a range are one thing, sweetheart. Real missions are something else." Sarah turned her head slowly to look at him. "I've been on 17 combat deployments, Corporal. I've taken fire. I've saved lives. What I haven't done is call a fellow soldier sweetheart like we're at some bar." The other men shifted uncomfortably. Russo's face turned red, but before he could respond, Hayes stepped between them. "That's enough," he said. Then he turned to Sarah. "You want on this team? Fine, but you have to prove you can handle what we do, and I'm not talking about hitting a target at 500 yards. He gestured to the range behind him. Sarah had been on this range dozens of times. It was a standard setup with targets at various distances, but something was different today. She noticed several officers standing near a building in the distance. Colonel Morrison was there, along with some people in civilian clothes she didn't recognize. "See that water tower?" Hayes pointed to a structure nearly a mile away. "We've set up a special target. It's a pressure-sensitive explosive device attached to a steel plate. The plate is 12 inches by 12 inches. The distance is exactly 2,100 yards. Sarah's stomach tightened. That was over 1.25 miles. She had never attempted a shot that far. Hayes continued, "But here's the kicker. You see those flags?" He pointed to several flags positioned at intervals between the range and the water tower. They were all pointing different directions, snapping in the wind. "We've got crosswinds, updrafts, and downdrafts all along the trajectory. The temperature is rising, which means the air density is changing, and you've got exactly 1 shot." "1 shot?" Sarah asked. "1 shot, because that's all you get in the field sometimes. Either you can make the impossible happen or you can't." He leaned in closer. 3 of my best men have tried this shot in the past month. All of them missed. Good men, great snipers. So if they can't do it, what makes you think you can?" Sarah looked at the distant water tower. She could barely see it clearly without optics. The math alone would be staggering. Wind speed and direction at multiple points. Bullet drop over that distance. The Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation. Temperature, humidity, even the spin of the bullet itself. "When do I take the shot?" she asked quietly. Hayes checked his watch. "You've got 6 hours to prepare, that's all. Study the conditions, do your calculations, pick your weapon. At 1400 hours, you either take the shot or you walk away. And Mitchell," he leaned in close enough that only she could hear, "everyone up there is watching. The colonel thinks this is a waste of time. Those civilians are from the Defense Department, considering new training protocols. You miss this shot, you don't just embarrass yourself. You set back every woman trying to get into special operations." Sarah felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. It wasn't fair. When Russo or any of the other men failed, they failed as individuals. But if she failed, she'd be failing for every woman who would come after her. Understood, Master Sergeant, she said. Hayes nodded and walked back to his team. They were already talking among themselves, laughing, making jokes. She heard Russo say something about participation trophies, and the others cracked up. Sarah turned toward the equipment building. She had 6 hours. 6 hours to do what 3 experienced snipers had failed to do. 6 hours to prove she belonged. As she walked away, she heard Hayes call out one more thing. "Oh, and Mitchell, don't feel bad when you miss. Like I said, it can't be done, not in these conditions, not by anyone." Sarah didn't turn around. She just kept walking, her mind already working through the variables, the calculations, the impossible mathematics of a shot that couldn't be made. But Sarah Mitchell had built her entire career on doing things people said couldn't be done. And she wasn't about to stop now. Sarah sat alone in the equipment room, surrounded by rifles, scopes, and ammunition. She had spread out maps, wind charts, and calculation sheets across a long metal table. A cup of coffee sat cooling beside her, untouched for the past hour. Her hands moved quickly, writing numbers, checking them, writing more. Distance, 2,100 yards. That was 1.19 miles. The bullet would be in flight for roughly 3 to 4 seconds, depending on the round she chose. In that time, wind could push it several feet off course. Gravity would pull it down over 60 feet from the initial trajectory. The Earth itself would rotate beneath the bullet's path. She closed her eyes and thought about how she had gotten here. 12 years ago, she had been Sarah Chen, a scared 18-year-old from a small town in Ohio. Her father had died when she was 10. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep their house. Sarah had been a good student, but college wasn't an option, not with the money they didn't have. The Army recruiter had seemed like an answer to prayer. Education benefits, a steady paycheck, a chance to serve something bigger than herself. Her mother had cried the day she enlisted, but Sarah saw the relief in her eyes too. One less mouth to feed, one less burden. Basic training had been hard, but Sarah was no stranger to hard work. What surprised her was how good she was at shooting. The rifle had felt natural in her hands from the first day on the range. Her drill sergeant noticed. He recommended her for additional marksmanship training. By her 2nd year, she was competing in shooting competitions. By her 4th year, she had completed the basic sniper course at the top of her class. That's when she met Captain Jennifer Morrison, now Colonel Morrison's wife, who had since passed away from cancer. Captain Morrison had been one of the few female combat veterans at the base, and she had taken Sarah under her wing. "They're going to test you harder than the men," Captain Morrison had told her. "They're going to hold you to a higher standard. It's not fair, but it's real. So you have 2 choices. You can fight against it and burn out, or you can be so good they can't ignore you." Sarah had chosen to be so good they couldn't ignore her. 17 deployments later, she had proven herself in every way that mattered. She had saved lives. She had completed her missions. She had done everything asked of her and more, but Phantom Squad remained out of reach. Hayes and his team were legends on the base. They got the special assignments, the recognition, the respect. And they made it clear they had no interest in letting a woman join their brotherhood. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her calculations again. She picked up a pencil and made an adjustment to her wind calculation for the midpoint of the trajectory. The door opened behind her. She turned to see Colonel Morrison walking in. He was in his late 50s with gray hair cut military short and eyes that missed nothing. Sarah started to stand, but he waved her down. "At ease, Sergeant, just checking in." He walked over to the table and looked at her calculations. "That's some complex math." "Yes, sir. The shot requires accounting for multiple variables simultaneously." Morrison picked up one of her charts. "Hayes told me he's had 3 men try this. All failed." "So I heard, sir." "He also told me that he doesn't think it can be done, not under current conditions." Morrison set down the chart and looked at her directly. "So why are you here, Mitchell? Why put yourself through this?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Because I'm qualified, sir. Because I've earned the right to try. And because if I don't, then every woman who comes after me will have one more excuse thrown in her face." Morrison nodded slowly. "Captain Morrison, my wife, she talked about you before she passed. Did you know that?" Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "No, sir." "She said you were the real deal, said you had the skill and the heart. She also said you'd face battles that had nothing to do with the enemy." He paused. "She was right. I've been watching Hayes and his team. They're good at what they do, but they're also comfortable, maybe too comfortable. They've started to believe their own legend." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Mitchell, I'm not going to tell you that you have to make this shot. This is a qualification test, not a requirement. If you want to walk away, there's no shame in that. You've already proven yourself as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, sir, but I'm taking the shot. Morrison smiled slightly. I thought you'd say that. Good luck, Sergeant. After he left, Sarah returned to her preparations. She had selected her rifle, an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle chambered in 300 Win Mag. It was a newer weapon, capable of the accuracy she needed at extreme range. She had already zeroed the scope on the shorter range, making minute adjustments until she was satisfied. Now came the hardest part, predicting conditions that wouldn't exist until she took the shot. The wind was the biggest challenge. She had been watching the flags for 3 hours now, recording wind direction and speed every 15 minutes. There was a pattern, but it wasn't consistent. The terrain created pockets of turbulence. The rising temperature made the air less dense, which would affect the bullet's flight. She needed to account for all of it, synthesize it into a single firing solution, and trust that her calculations were correct. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at a photo of her mother. It had been taken last Christmas when Sarah was home on leave. Her mother looked older now, more tired, but her smile was genuine. She had been so proud when Sarah made staff sergeant. I'm doing this for both of us, Mom, Sarah whispered to the photo. She put the phone away and stood up. It was time to check the wind conditions again. Time to refine her calculations. Time to prepare for a shot that couldn't be made. Outside, she could see Phantom Squad gathered near the range. They were relaxed, joking around. Russo was demonstrating something with his hands, probably telling some story about his supposed greatness. The others laughed. They had already decided she would fail. Sarah felt something harden inside her chest. It wasn't anger exactly, it was determination, pure, focused determination. She would show them what impossible looked like. At 1300 hours, Sarah walked to the firing line carrying the M2010. The rifle was heavy in her hands, a familiar weight that brought comfort. She had checked and rechecked every calculation. She had studied the wind until she could close her eyes and see the pattern in her mind. She had done everything she could do. Now it was time to shoot. Phantom Squad was already there, spread out like spectators at a sporting event. Hayes stood front and center, arms crossed. Russo leaned against a concrete barrier, smirking. The others watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Colonel Morrison was positioned near the observation building with the civilian officials from the Defense Department. They had binoculars and spotting scopes trained on the distant water tower. Sarah set up her shooting position on a raised platform that gave her a clear line of sight. She extended the bipod and carefully placed the rifle down. Then she lay prone behind it, settling into the position she had practiced thousands of times. You've got until 1400 hours, Hayes called out. That gives you 1 hour. Take your time, make sure you're ready. Sarah ignored him. She was already looking through the scope, finding the water tower in the distance. At maximum magnification, she could see the steel plate mounted on the tower's side. It looked impossibly small, 12 inches by 12 inches over a mile away. She checked her watch. The temperature was still rising. That meant the air density was changing. Her calculations from an hour ago would need adjustment. Sarah pulled out her data book and made quick notes. Wind from the southeast at 7 miles per hour at ground level. Flags at midpoint showing 8 to 10 miles per hour from the south. Flags near the target showing 6 miles per hour from the southwest. She ran the numbers in her head, making microscopic adjustments to her firing solution. You know what your problem is, Mitchell, Russo called out. You think too much. Sniping is about instinct, about feeling the shot. Women are too analytical, too in their heads. One of the other squad members, a quieter man named Patterson, spoke up. Come on, Russo, let her concentrate. What, I'm just making conversation. We could be here a while, Russo laughed. My bet is she doesn't even take the shot. She'll spend the whole hour calculating and then claim she needs more time. Sarah tuned them out. She had learned long ago that men like Russo only had power if you gave them attention. Instead, she focused on her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady, lowering her heart rate. She made minute adjustments to the scope. Elevation for the extreme distance. Windage for the crosswind. She was aiming several feet to the left and several feet above the actual target to compensate for wind and bullet drop. Minutes ticked by. Sarah waited. She was waiting for something specific, something she had noticed in her 3 hours of observation. The wind pattern wasn't random. Every 18 to 23 minutes, there was a brief window where the winds aligned. The flags at all 3 points would shift to a more consistent direction for about 30 to 40 seconds. It wasn't perfect, but it was as close to perfect as she was going to get. 30 minutes gone, Hayes announced. Shot clock is running. Sarah checked her watch. The last wind alignment had happened at 12:42. That meant the next one should come around 1300 or 1305. She settled deeper into her position. Her finger rested along the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. Not yet. At 1300, she saw the first flag shift. Then the second. Her heart rate picked up slightly. She controlled her breathing, bringing it back down. The third flag shifted. All 3 were now showing wind from the south-southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. This was it. This was her window. Sarah made one final microscopic adjustment to the scope. She moved her finger to the trigger. She took a breath, let half of it out, and held. Through the scope, she could see the steel plate. Her crosshairs were positioned in space where no target existed, but where she needed to aim to account for all the variables. Physics, math, wind, gravity, the Earth's rotation, all of it came down to this moment. Sarah began to squeeze the trigger, slow, steady pressure. "She's not actually going to," Russo started to say. The rifle fired. The sound was enormous in the quiet afternoon. The recoil pushed against Sarah's shoulder, but she was already recovering, keeping her eye to the scope, watching. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. It would take roughly 3.5 seconds to reach the target. In that time, the bullet would travel through different wind zones, drop over 60 feet, and drift with the Earth's rotation. Sarah counted in her head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Nothing happened. 4 Mississippi. Still nothing. Behind her, she heard Russo start to laugh. Called it. She missed by a mile, probably. The explosion cut him off. Over a mile away, the steel plate erupted in a brilliant flash of light and smoke. The sound reached them a second later, a deep boom that echoed across the range. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Sarah stayed in position, looking through the scope at the smoke where the target had been. She had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, she had made the impossible shot. She slowly sat up and safed the rifle. Hayes was staring at the water tower, his mouth slightly open. Patterson had his hand over his mouth in shock. Russo looked like someone had slapped him. Colonel Morrison was walking toward them from the observation building, and he was smiling. "That's not possible," Hayes said quietly. "The wind, the distance, that's not possible." Sarah stood up, holding her rifle at her side. She looked directly at Hayes. "You're right, Master Sergeant, it can't be done, I just did it anyway." For the first time since she had met him, Derek Hayes had nothing to say. The observation building was more crowded than Sarah expected. Colonel Morrison sat at the head of a long table. The 3 civilians from the Defense Department were there, along with Hayes and his entire team. Sarah sat at the opposite end from the colonel, her hands folded in front of her. One of the civilians, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair, spoke first. "Sergeant Mitchell, I'm Dr. Patricia Henderson from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. What you did today was remarkable. We've had computer modeling suggest that shot was possible, but with a success probability of less than 3%. Sarah nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Dr. Henderson glanced at her colleagues. "I think we need to discuss what happened here because it raises some important questions." She turned to Hayes. "Master Sergeant Hayes, you told us this shot couldn't be made under these conditions. You said 3 of your best men had failed. What's your assessment now?" Hayes shifted in his seat. To his credit, he met Dr. Henderson's eyes directly. "My assessment is that I was wrong. Sergeant Mitchell made the shot. That speaks for itself." "Does it?" Dr. Henderson pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. "Because I've been reviewing the records. Staff Sergeant Mitchell has been requesting assignment to advanced sniper units for 3 years. Her scores are consistently in the top 5%. Her combat record is exemplary, yet she's been denied each time. Can you explain why?" The room went quiet. Hayes looked uncomfortable. The advanced units require a certain level of cohesion. Team dynamics are crucial in the field. Team dynamics, Dr. Henderson repeated. Is that military terminology for no women allowed? That's not what I said. But is it what you meant? Dr. Henderson set down her tablet. Master Sergeant, let me be clear. The Defense Department is under pressure to expand opportunities for women in combat specialties. We've been studying the barriers that prevent qualified female soldiers from advancing, and what we keep finding are gatekeeping exercises like the one we witnessed today. Hayes leaned forward. With respect, ma'am, that shot was a legitimate test of skill. Was it? Because according to my information, you set up that shot specifically to be impossible. You've had your own team members attempt it as a training exercise, and all of them failed. Yet you required Sergeant Mitchell to complete it successfully on her first try, with only 6 hours of preparation, as a condition for even being considered for your unit. Dr. Henderson's voice was calm but firm. That's not a test. That's a setup designed to fail. Russo, who had been silent until now, spoke up. She could have gotten lucky. Dr. Henderson turned to him. Luck. At 2,100 yards in variable wind conditions. Corporal, do you understand the mathematics involved in that shot? I understand sniping just fine. Then you understand that Sergeant Mitchell had to calculate bullet drop, wind drift at multiple points along the trajectory, the Coriolis effect, air density changes, and barrel temperature effects, then synthesize all of that into a single firing solution accurate to within 6 inches at over a mile distance. Dr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. That's not luck, that's mastery. The room fell silent again. Sarah watched the exchange but said nothing. This wasn't her fight anymore. These people were fighting it for her. Colonel Morrison spoke for the first time. Master Sergeant Hayes, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. If Sergeant Mitchell were a man with her exact same record and skills, would you have accepted her into Phantom Squad 3 years ago? Hayes looked down at the table. For a long moment he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Probably, sir. Probably or definitely. Hayes raised his eyes. Definitely, sir. Morrison nodded. Thank you for your honesty. He turned to Sarah. Sergeant Mitchell, you've more than proven yourself today. The question is, what do you want to happen next? Sarah had been thinking about this moment for 3 years. In her imagination, it had always been triumphant. She would prove herself, and Hayes and his team would apologize, and she would join Phantom Squad and live happily ever after. But sitting here now, looking at these men who had doubted her, mocked her, and set her up to fail, she realized something. She didn't want to join their team anymore. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. Sarah stood up. She looked at Hayes, then at each member of Phantom Squad. 3 years ago, I would have given anything to be part of this unit. I believed that joining Phantom Squad was the pinnacle of what I could achieve as a sniper. I wanted your respect, your acceptance. She paused. But I've learned something in the past 3 years. I don't need your acceptance to be excellent at my job. I don't need your permission to be one of the best snipers in the Army. I already am. She turned to Dr. Henderson. Ma'am, you mentioned the Defense Department is expanding opportunities for women in combat specialties. What exactly does that mean? Dr. Henderson smiled. It means we're creating new specialized units with new selection criteria based purely on merit. We need instructors, people who can train the next generation without the old prejudices. She slid a folder across the table toward Sarah. We've been authorized to offer you a position at the new Advanced Marksmanship Training Center at Fort Benning. You'd be training elite snipers from all branches of the military. It comes with a promotion to Sergeant First Class. Sarah picked up the folder but didn't open it yet. And the selection criteria for these units. Performance-based only. You make the shot or you don't. You meet the standard or you don't. Gender doesn't enter the equation. Sarah looked down at the folder in her hands. A promotion. A chance to shape the future of sniper training. A chance to make sure the next generation of female soldiers wouldn't face the same barriers she had faced. She looked back at Phantom Squad. Hayes was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Patterson looked thoughtful. Russo just looked angry. I accept, Sarah said. Dr. Henderson stood and shook her hand. Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Mitchell. Welcome to the future. Colonel Morrison stood as well. I'll make sure the paperwork is processed immediately. You've made this base proud, Mitchell. As the meeting broke up, Hayes approached Sarah. He stood there for a moment, seeming to struggle with what to say. That was one hell of a shot, he finally said. Thank you, Master Sergeant. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of things. He extended his hand. No hard feelings. Sarah looked at his hand. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let him stand there with his hand out. But she thought about Captain Morrison's words from years ago. You can fight against it and burn out, or you can be so good they can't ignore you. She had been so good they couldn't ignore her. She had won, and winners could afford to be gracious. She shook his hand. No hard feelings, Master Sergeant. Good luck with your team. As she walked out of the building into the late afternoon sun, Sarah pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Hi, Mom," she said when the call connected. "I've got some news. I'm getting promoted, and I'm going to be training the next generation of Army snipers." Her mother's voice came through the phone, excited and proud. As Sarah walked across the base toward her barracks, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She had spent 3 years trying to prove she belonged in someone else's club. Now she was going to build her own club with her own rules, where skill was the only thing that mattered. That evening, word spread across the base about the impossible shot. Soldiers who had heard the story wanted to meet her, to shake her hand. Some of the younger female soldiers looked at her with something like awe. One of them, a private who couldn't have been more than 19, approached her nervously. "Sergeant First Class Mitchell, I heard what you did today. I just wanted to say, thank you. I want to be a sniper someday, and I didn't think it was possible for someone like me." Sarah smiled at her. "What's your name, Private?" "Jessica Torres, ma'am." "Private Torres, let me tell you something. The only impossible shots are the ones you don't take. You understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, work hard, trust your training, and never let anyone tell you what you can't do." As the young private walked away, Sarah thought about the shot she had made. 2,100 yards, variable winds, 3.5 seconds of flight time, math and physics and skill all coming together in one perfect moment. Everyone said it couldn't be done. And they were right, it couldn't be done. Until someone did it anyway. That's what Sarah Mitchell had learned in her years of service. Impossible just meant that no one had figured it out yet. It meant the challenge was harder, the odds were longer, the work was greater. But impossible didn't mean impossible. It just meant not yet. Sarah walked back to her barracks with her head high, already thinking about the future, about the soldiers she would train, about the barriers she would help break down, about the standards she would uphold. The shot she made today would be remembered. People would talk about it for years. The woman who made the impossible shot, the sniper who proved everyone wrong. But Sarah knew the truth. Today's impossible shot was just preparation for tomorrow's impossible mission, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because being impossible was what she did best. And she was just getting started.